Hello everybody, it's Teeny here with Teeny Time. Today I have a story called George the Bilby Chef, and it's written by Jetta Robard. Oh, it's George the Bilby Chef and the Raspberry Muffin Surprise. And there's George the Bilby. It's an Australian animal. George the Bilby Chef and the Raspberry Muffin Surprise. There's the raspberries growing. This is George. George is a Bilby who just loves to cook. There he is cooking away. George wears a puffy hat and an apron with countless pockets. In his apron, he always carries a spoon, which is very handy for taste testing. Sort of like Taste-a-Bicky, isn't it? There. All the things that George needs to cook with. A rolling pin and a tasting spoon, measuring cup, tea towel, notebook, and a neckerchief. George can cook just about anything, but his favourite recipes of all are for sweet things. Muffins, biscuits and cakes of every sort. George adores them all. Look at all the ones there, all the sweet things. It's good to have the sweet and the savoury. George loves to sing as he works. He can often be heard down in his kitchen singing one of his made-up songs, most of which are very silly and make no sense at all. Today is Betty Echidna's birthday. Betty is one of George's best friends, and George wanted to bake her something special. Oh, there she is there. That's another Australian animal, Matilda. I know that Percy and George and Addie and Harry will know about echidnas, but you might not. George browsed thoughtfully through his library of recipe books, and then he found just the thing. Betty loved raspberries, so George decided that a raspberry muffin would be perfect. Look, there's all his recipe books. He wrote down the ingredients and then set off to gather them. But there was one big problem. George didn't have any raspberries. He didn't even know where the raspberry patch was. Little Bee was flying home from collecting pollen when she saw George walking around in circles. It was funny to watch, but made Little Bee dizzy. He's looking around for all the little veggie patch. And there's Little Bee. She zoomed down with a loud bzzz and landed on George's shoulder. Oh, look. George, where are you going? She asked. Oh, Little Bee, said George, happy to see his friend. I don't really know. I can't remember where the raspberry patch is. Silly George, Little Bee said with a laugh. You're nearly there. Follow me. Little Bee flew in front to show him the way. There. The raspberry patch was huge. George, being a bilby, couldn't reach any of the berries, and Little Bee, being a little bee, couldn't pick them. Look, there they are standing, and look at all the raspberries. They just couldn't get to them. They'll come up with something, I feel sure. George sat beneath the raspberry patch and tried to think of a plan. A ladder, suggested Little Bee. No, said George. A ladder will be too heavy. I think we need something that floats. Or flies, said Little Bee excitedly as she jumped up to greet another friend. Who is it? It's Maggie. Maggie the magpie. She lives just next door, high up in her neat little tree house. She was always ready to lend a helping hand, or in Maggie's case, a helping wing. George described the special treat that he wanted to make for Betty's birthday. Maggie liked Betty very much. She also really liked the idea of raspberry muffins too. Maggie flew up and shook the raspberry tree as hard as she could, and down tumbled the berries. Plop, plop, plop. There they come. George was so happy that he started to sing one of his made-up songs. Raspberry, raspberry, red and sweet, how very lovely you are to eat. Before he could start another verse, Little Bee pointed out that they had another problem. All of the juicy raspberries had rolled beneath the bush. George scrambled after them when he heard a grumpy voice. They're looking, aren't they? Well, I'll be. I will never get these stains out of my rug. Oh dear, it's Bert, said Maggie with a sigh, and he doesn't sound very happy. Out popped Bert, covered in raspberry juice. Some of the ripe raspberries must have tumbled right into his house. Oh, there's Bert the mouse. He doesn't look that thrilled. He's holding a nice big ripe raspberry though. Little Bee laughed so hard she gave herself the hiccups, which made everyone laugh, even Bert. George quickly explained to Bert what they had planned for Betty's birthday. Here they are. He's catching on. He'll come good. Bert was a very tidy mouse and liked things just so. He could be a bit grumpy, but he was really a very nice mouse. And Bert always enjoyed a good party. Look at Bert there. He had a tiny barrow that he used in his garden, which fitted one raspberry perfectly. Bert rolled out the raspberries one by one. George took two, and Maggie carried the rest in her shopping bag. Little Bee led the way again as George sang another of his ridiculous rhymes. Raspberry, raspberry, red and bright, how you gave Bert a terrible fright. They laughed and sang all the way back to George's house, except for Bert, who didn't think that the song was very funny. Maggie, Little Bee and Bert helped to get the house ready. Maggie and Little Bee attached the streamers while Bert rolled out the plates. Oh, Bert's really very helpful. And there's all the streamers are getting ready for the party. He'll have to make the raspberry muffins soon though. Word got around and lots of other friends came to help too. George's parties and his delicious baked treats were quite famous. George finally had all his ingredients and went happily down to his kitchen to cook. There he is on his way. Has everything ready. There's a nice string basket there. He sifted the flour and measured the sugar and cracked the eggs and melted the butter and finally added the juicy raspberries. George whipped up the raspberry muffins in a flash. And there's all the ingredients there. And there's George doing the cooking. He popped them into his huge oven and waited while they cooked. Oh, look, he's got his feet up waiting. I bet they taste great, these muffins. When they were ready, he placed them in his special basket for taking things up to the top room. Look there. And up they come. He called out to his friends above to wind the handle, and up went the basket. George ran up the stairs. He put all the muffins on the plates and made everyone hide. Oh, it was going to be a surprise. Just in time, Betty arrived to a very loud surprise, with all of her friends wishing her a very happy birthday. Look, there she is there. Betty gave George a giant hug. She was delighted and very excited because raspberry muffins really were her favourite thing. And there's everyone at the party eating the raspberry muffins. And that's the end of George the Bilby Chef and the raspberry muffin surprise. Bye-bye for now. Love you all.